Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, herbiologist, and joining me again this week as co-host Capping with Candace. Candace here. Candace, it's Travers weekend. It's time to paint the canoe. It's the Midsummer Derby. Have you got all your cliches ready for this coming weekend?
I'm ready. Fourth leg of the Triple Crown, because that makes sense.
I think they were calling it Grand Slam if he wins the Breeders' Cup Classic. But
Oh,
anyways, we're getting
fancy.
ahead of ourselves, and should be a great race of series of races at Saratoga. Weather is expected to be nice, and we're going to handicap the pick four because I think there's going to be a lot of interest in those other races. And then, of course, the finale of the pick four is the Travers Stakes. But year after year, the King's Bishop has become that grade one race that everybody wants to win for the sprinter types, and this year it drew a nice field again.
It did. It seems like this race, comes up competitive every year, and for that reason, historically, it seems like in recent years we've seen a couple of bombs really show up in this sort of a race because you get some of those horses who maybe were on the Triple Crown trail and then they're cutting back and just going to the sprints now. And then you have some of the more up and coming types who maybe got a late start in the year, maybe debut as 3-year-olds. And perhaps, some of those horses, maybe haven't had the speed trained out of them a little bit. Sometimes, these horses that maybe they were intended to sprint all along, they were stretched out for these Triple Crown races, and you almost can't always go back. Like sometimes that speed they had isn't there anymore once you stretch them out over so much ground. So it provides an interesting dichotomy in this race. For me, I would fully expect Holy Boss to be a pretty heavy favorite in here, and deservedly so. That last run of his I thought was very good over Requite and Barbados. So I think he deserves favoritism. I'm a little sketchy of him at 7 furlongs, which is why I'm going to be against him here. Uh, I I'm not sure he's quite as effective over that distance, and I see a little bit of speed in this race. Obviously it's sprinters, so they're going to be going fast, but I think he's going to be up with mixing it up with a couple horses out front there, and I'm not sure if the distance combined with some added early pace in here is really going to be to his liking. So I'm going to be against him. Another horse who I expect to take tons and tons and tons of money is Run Happy. I don't know if any horse has been more hyped than him lately. Again, I get it. Totally deserved. Has ran really well this year. But he's another. Is he as good over 7 furlongs? I'm not so sure. And that outside post certainly doesn't help him out. What do you think? Do you see that them taking the most money in the betting?
Well, I can't imagine Competitive Edge being no worse than the second favorite, unless, and if he is, I guess he doesn't have a chance to win. I guess I would
Yeah.
say that. I mean, a Pletcher horse that was hammered at the windows three straight times, and bottom line is he ran a 109 in the Haskell and faded. I mean, I assume that people are going to go back to Competitive Edge, but maybe
Yeah.
not.
No, yeah, no. I suppose he would take money too. I would still think Holy Boss to be favored over him, but right, he should be in the mix. I I don't love him. I think he ran really well against Pharaoh, but aside from that, he left a lot to be desired in his race before that. I don't see it.
Mr. Z, he's dropping back in distance, which was kind of the plan for the last month and a half. You can go either way with him. I mean, I never expected him to be the world's greatest router. I kind of thought he could be a 7 furlong or a miler, but the problem is now he's ran so many long distance races, I don't know if he's got that speed anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. And he's another one. Because he's such a quirky type, they've really found a way with him in getting him in front of everybody, so that he's not really in close quarters with anybody. Then one horse will engage him, and that's when he's at his absolute best, putting one horse away. He's not going to get that set up here, so I would be wary of him in this spot. A few others like Grand Billy, I think if you just look at the form, you could easily make a case for him, but he's one who doesn't seem, he's only traveled away from Gulfstream one time, and it wasn't a good one. So I'm not sure I could trust him on the ship. Um, Commute, I think you could make a case for him as well, but he really jumped up in that sloppy effort, so you have to wonder, was it the slop that pushed him forward, or was it the 7 furlong distance that was his liking? Maybe a little bit of both. Um, But for me, in this sort of a race, I would be putting a win bet on Classy Class here. I really liked his last win, and I know he's been kind of loose on the lead in his 2 wins that he's had recently, but he has shown an ability to come from a little bit further back. In the past, I think he broke his maiden coming from off the pace. I think the 7 furlongs for a horse like him is perfect. He couldn't, really stay on for that mile and an eighth. 6 furlongs too short. This is absolutely his distance. And he's never come across to me as a particularly headstrong horse. So I don't see him, having much issue, just kind of slotting in behind the real front runners, kind of a nice cozy spot up, forward to mid pack. So I'm gonna go Classy Class to win here. In doubles, I'll also be using Commute, but it's an interesting race where I think there's some prices to be had.
Yeah, if you really, the fastest of the fast is Holy Boss, and then, Run Happy's last race is just ridiculous on a
Yeah.
speed figure standpoint. I ended up going with Run Happy just because I'm intrigued by him because, he is 3 for 4. The one lost, I mean, they threw him into the stakes race at a route after a monster maiden win and moving from poly to dirt. So he didn't really have a chance in the one loss. I mean, those last fractions are just amazing. 44, 108, 115. I mean, maybe he is this good. Holy Boss beat a 6-horse field the last time. He dusted March, so I can't really make a case for March.
No.
I do think Competitive Edge is going to run good just because sometimes, I mean, I think he does got a little bit of a class edge on these guys and maybe cutting back after the route. Maybe he can rate a little bit off the pace, but they ran that one time while he was 6, so we just don't really know where he is mentally.
Right.
And, Mr. Z, as much as, problem is Mr. Z is one of those horses that after the race, everybody just loves him running second and thirds, but nobody honestly really thinks he's going to win this race. But, I guess, I like Mr. Z, and yeah, I think he'll run well, but do I think he's actually going to win? No, I can't pick a horse that's 2 for 16 to win, so I guess I'm kind of just going with Run Happy, but I agree with you with Commute and Classy Class. I think those horses are usable, and probably Holy Boss. I guess I'm tossing March, and I guess that's really my only strong opinion, and I'm thinking Run Happy is probably twice the odds of Street Holy Boss, but I'm not sure what that really means.
Yeah, I mean, how do we take too? Then in the same breath, there's some very lightly raced horses in this field. You have Limousine Liberal, the Ellis Park record holder, I guess. That track must have been a runway. Those sectionals were crazy. He's ran twice, so you think he's eligible to jump forward in this sort of a spot. Watershed comes in here off of just a maiden win, but it was an impressive one, went 5 wide. He got a 95 buyer. That's pretty big for a horse on debut, I would say. So how are you treating those kind of more lightly raced types?
Watershed, I think, is usable just because of his running style. I mean, now granted, you never want to quote-unquote determine a running style after just one race, but the fact that he got a big speed figure and it's a really nice pedigree, and Rosario, I really don't want to get into the way he's riding, but when he does ride well, he seems to ride best on closers. So I think all the signs are pretty good that Watershed should be able to run his race, and if he is a legitimate closer, I think he'll get pace to run at here.
Yeah, and I mean, you always know connections like that. Kira McLaughlin, Darley, they're looking to have, the results on the big days. I'm sure they would love to get this on the undercard, and then, they would have frosted later. So we'll see. It could be a big day for them.
Yeah, I guess my overall opinion on the race is I think some people are going to look at this as a slam dunk for Holy Boss.
I don't see that.
And I don't see that either. I just think the King's Bishop is usually just a tougher race than that. And I guess if I had to just key one horse, I would probably key Competitive Edge just because I think he's probably going to run well. But I'm picking Run Happy just because maybe he's just faster than these guys, and I'll just take a swing at 4-1 and see if he can do it.
Yeah, and these are one of those few races that in this sort of a division, you tend to see like the Woody Stevens, the King's Bishop. They at times come out to be the strongest race any of these horses will face all year. And that's not even a Breeders' Cup or a Triple Crown race, but it's always a good one. And I think, I think there's some vulnerable favorites here, so I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, and we'll kind of sort out, where, I mean, I think the winner of this, I mean, especially if Run Happy or Holy Boss do win this, I mean, because they would do it near the front end and
Hmm.
probably with a fast time. So if one of those two does win it, they're legitimately a pretty fast horse.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens if either of them does it because it's an interesting division. Supposing they would, try to go either Breeders' Cup Sprint or maybe stretch out to Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Um, if they go sprint, that certainly is looking a tougher and tougher race as every day goes on.
Yeah, I think there's some good horses here, and I guess the only thing to note is that maybe the late developers this year really only seem to be in the sprint division because there's no new guys in the Travers, as we'll talk about later on.
Yeah.
The Forego Stakes is race 9, and this again, I think a lot of people are going to go right to the race favorite, and I think the pace dynamics is going to determine the winner of this race.
I do too, and I tried. I really tried. I tried to find somebody who's going to go with Private Zone, and I just don't see it. Wildcat Red used to have early speed, and they aren't using that anymore. His last win, he came from off the pace. Was impressive in doing so, but he came from off the pace, so I don't expect him to be up forward. Tamer Kuz is maybe the only other source of speed, but he's very unreliable out of the gates historically, so you can't really count on him to go up there and pressure Private Zone either. It might be boring to say, but I don't see it. For me, Private Zone, he's going to get a big win bet for me. And I think if you're playing multiples, that he's a single.
Well, I agree that if you think he's going to win, then he is a single because the rest of them, then you got to do the spread. You got to go 4 or 5 deep. So I think, to me, whenever you have a horse like this, if you think he's going to win, then you single him. If you think he's going to lose, my strategy is to toss him and then go 5 deep. So
Yes.
I ended up going with Tamer Kuz, and the reason why is I loved his Met Mile. He just made his move too soon. Going into the turn, I thought he was going to win that race.
Me too. I had him.
And
Guessing.
everybody is forgetting about that. And I don't think it has nothing to do, I don't think it's a form of honor code. It's not the form of tonalist. It's just the fact that he made a winning move in a 1 mile race.
Mhm.
And that race was very fast. Now he cuts back to 7 furlongs off the layoff. And I think he's live here. But so I just think he's going to be 8-9 to 1. And I'd rather have a horse like him. I do think the Big Beast ran really huge the last time against Rockfall, who's as good as any 6 furlong sprinter there is. But I agree with you. I mean, if the Big Beast goes after Private Zone, all he does is just make Private Zone lose. I don't think the Big Beast can go after him and win.
Well, and that's it. And that's what's so dangerous about a horse like Private Zone. It's kind of like how Byron was last year at his best. People could easily say, well, just go after him. But if you're doing that, that you're costing yourself the race. Who wants to do that in a big Grade 1 race? Nobody. So, like I said, I don't see it. I don't think Big Beast is good. I don't think on quality if they both run their to their norm, to their standard. I don't think he's as good as Private Zone. And I don't think he's as good as a lot of these. Like, he's a horse who he's good, but he's just kind of perpetually overrated to me. He always takes money, even in races really where he shouldn't. So he's a tough one, and me in these sorts of fields, I couldn't play the Big Beast here. I'd be much more comfortable just singling Private Zone. Um, for you on Tamer, because I can see the appeal. I had him in the Met Mile, and it was a depressing day. What I would say for him is I'd be much more comfortable with him over a mile than 7. It's a little bit short for him. He needed the break, so that's being fresh is no worry. When he ran the Met Mile, that was at the tail end of a very long campaign for him. So the break should only help him. But again, a horse like him, I would want. I mean, and you'll get it here. So this is probably this kind of place if you like him to play him. A horse like him, you need a little bit of a price because he's extremely unreliable out of the gate. He pulls the Kobe's back more often than you think. So you have to take that into consideration when you're betting him to not take anything too short, knowing that happens with him fairly often. The one horse I will say, and I don't think he'll win in this spot, but for underneath, like if you're like me playing private zone, if I key him on top and you're looking for something underneath, I have no idea what price he'll go off at because he's usually taking money, but his last race was so bad. I wonder if he will. But race day is really intriguing to me in this spot. That last race was so bad, I almost can't even take it seriously. Like something must have been wrong, or he wasn't fully cranked or something, because he's just not, that's not him at all. And we know all the track was playing there. When he broke as slow as he did and was as lazy as he was out of the gate, he was already done for. So I'm very intrigued to see what race day does in this spot, because I do think if he's anywhere near his typical form we've seen of him, he would be a player in a race like the Dirt Mile. So we'll see what he does here. I think he's intriguing on the rail. Like I said, I don't see him as a win threat, but underneath, I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up, and I think a lot of people might end up ultimately tossing him after that last race coming off the layoff, and he's not that bad. That's not him.
Yeah, and Braidster loves Monmouth Park, and Braidster was sharp that day. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe like.
Well, the form hasn't come back awful. I mean, obviously he was never in it, but like I said, Braidster was super sharp. Red Vine was what, third last week in the Pacific Classic?
So yeah, maybe they just kind of like packed it in after 2 furlongs because it was such a long layoff. Although I got to admit, Race Day's been nominated for every race from Pacific
He's racing
Classic
everywhere.
to the Gus Bosselman to the Mystic Lake Derby. I mean, my God, to the Prairie Meadows Cornhusker. I mean, I don't know what these owners are up to. They're on Twitter. Maybe somebody should ask them
They
because
were
they
always
seem to
kind
love
of
to pay
weird, though.
nomination fees because
They
he's
were
nominated
always
for everything.
they were always a little bit of a weird one though, because you know we think of Fletcher and we think of his typical spots, yet you know early in the year we see him running around in Oaklawn Park by himself. Like it just didn't never I feel like his spots have never made sense for the way we look at Fletcher. So I don't know. It must be the owners. They're just picking these spots.
Well, and that's like I say, but they're nominating them for all these races that like it. I mean, you're going to say, well, it's $100, but you know what? You $100 times 20 races that you have no intention of running in is $2,000. So I don't know. It just seems like they don't really have a plan. But I think this one is one that the owners kind of drive in the decision making. You know, the one thing I will note about private, I'm drawing a blank, but
Private zone.
private zone is. And it doesn't really mean anything, but I think it does if he loses. Like his last 3 wins, he's won in a 5-horse field, a 6-horse field, and a 6-horse field.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what you're saying is, well, I can't find any horse to show speed. Well, I'm saying is in a 13-horse field, I don't know who's going to show speed, but chances are somebody will and will screw him up. That's
I
my.
guess. So when I look at even in those small fields he was running in, especially his last race, he got a completely uncontested lead and was going way faster than I've ever seen any of these horses go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that to me, that's the thing is, it's not that he can't go fast. He has no issue setting fast fractions. It's whether or not his lead is uncontested or not. I mean, I think it says a lot with how sharp this horse is. Even that in the Met Mile, which we know is too far. We know he's not a miler, and they went fast, and he still finished third. I thought that was pretty good, especially considering what Honor Code and Tolos have done since.
Well, and it wasn't just third. I mean, he was in the race to the wire. I mean,
Yes.
he would have won the race if they went to ran lights out. I mean, that's what I'm saying, though. Like, in a race like this, like, as stupid as it sounds, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Den's Legacy is pressing him after a half mile. And I can't predict that. I'm just saying when there's 4 horses in the race, that means there's only 3 horses that can press him. But when there's 13 in the race, there's 12 that can press him.
Yeah.
So that's my only philosophy. I mean, like I say, he may win. I'm just saying, like, after the race, if he loses, that's my excuse, and I'm saying it before the race. Like, somebody will mess with him that I can't predict.
Yes. No, I mean, I'm sure somebody will try. We'll see. We'll see if anyone's fast enough. It would be a shocker if nobody tried.
That's what I mean. So, like, maybe Big Beast puts a little bit, or maybe all of a sudden Race Day's got speed, or maybe
Sky shoots to the front.
for the first time in his life, Tamarcuz breaks cleanly out of the gate or something, and then the whole race, just like I say, I think the race will. I just don't think the best horses are going to win these races this weekend. I think it's a lot. I always say, the Breeders' Cup the last 5 years, the win percentages on Breeders' Cup was like 20%. Why? Because they're finally facing 12 horse fields and goofy pace scenarios develop, and you finally find out who we think going into the race is the best horse is not always the best horse once they get a little bit of pressure on some other horses. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm going to say. I don't know why some horse will show speed in this race, but I have a feeling somebody will.
Okay.
So the 10th race is the Sword Dancer. Now this one's got, a bunch of Euro shippers. Some we've seen before, some we haven't. Lots of options you can go here, and yet at the end of the day, you still have to respect Twilight Eclipse in a spot like this, although he's like the Mr. Z of turfers. He doesn't win often.
Yeah, this is a race where I'll be one of the few where I'm very against the favorite, who I presume is Flinch here, was second in the Breeders' Cup Turf. People in America love this horse. I don't really know what it is about him that, seems to have really kind of gotten steam out here, because he's only ran here once and it was good, but I mean, he was well beaten by main sequence. But people just love him out here. He's a tough horse for me to ever take. He finishes second incredibly often, and it's not even because he's great. The thing is, like, he finishes second a lot in races where he was never going to win, if that makes sense. So to me, it's a big difference between finishing second and losing on the wire versus like getting up for second and the winner is a length and a half in front and you never even engage them. And that's kind of how he is. He finishes, he gets up for placings a lot of times because he has a little bit of, tactical speed overseas. Not really here. He's a little bit more outrun here. But that tactical speed usually just gets him in a good enough position that he can, get a placing. He stays on well in races, but he doesn't win often. And he's going to be very, very short here. I can't have him, especially because this race was not the plan. Flintshire was meant to run the King George, which is a very prestigious race over in England. Didn't end up running there because of the ground conditions. It rained a lot, and he doesn't go over soft ground. So when they pulled him out of that race, then they said he's coming here. So this was Plan B. This was not the original plan. Also, going forward, bear in mind, for him, the ultimate goal, of course, is the Arc. So this is a stepping stone to the Arc. I'm sure they would like to win here and get this, grade 1 on his resume. But there's a lot of intent and his form coming in that I'm not thrilled about, and I would be happy to go against him in this sort of a spot. My top choice in here is going to be Red Rifle. I was very impressed with his run last time out. Even his run at Woodbine in the Dominion Day was very good. I think that this is the kind of race where he sits the right trip. He's going to be off the pace of the front runners, but close enough that he'll get first jump on a horse like Flintshire or a Messi. He'll be my top choice. I'll, definitely be keying him in spots and maybe playing him in some doubles with Private Zone. I'm looking to ultimately, I'm going to use my win bet on Red Rifle, but I ultimately in those doubles or pick 3 will use Red Rifle, Twilight Eclipse, and Messi. Twilight Eclipse, you have to respect him. I thought he ran lights out last time out. And if there was a trip horse in that race with Big Blue Kitten in slumber, it was Twilight Eclipse. The way Big Blue Kitten, ran next time out, there's, the form has stood up fine, and especially considering how that ground was in the Arlington Million. I thought Twilight Eclipse had just the roughest trip that we've seen in a while in one of these sorts of races in the United Nations. So I would expect him to come here sharp. This has been the goal for them for a long time. And Messi, by every quantitative measure I've seen, is actually a very similar profile to Flintshire as far as his running style. So it's the kind of what I'm saying is if Flinchier gets the setup in this race, Messi will too, and I would just rather take Messi at the bigger, what I would think is going to be a bigger price at least. So Red Rifle to win. I'm going to use Twilight Eclipse and Messi. I can't have Flinchier here.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying Flintshire's pointed to the arc, because I have no idea. That just seems like a recipe to lose 2 in a row. Like, why would you come here, prep for the arc? I mean, shipping here, the arc's on 45 days. I just assumed, since I remember him scratching because of the King George weather, but I assume they just come here running this and then running the Breeders' Cup turf and call it a career or something.
From what I've heard, it's going to be both. So it'll be here, then ARC, then Breeders' Cup turf, then Hong Kong Vaz. So that's crazy, but that's what I'm hearing. I mean, for them, he ran really well in the ARC last year, so I'm sure they're just looking at it. You know, it's like, well, he finished. If Trev wasn't in the ARC, we would have won. I don't. It's ambitious to say the least.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know, that does seem ambitious. I mean, I guess you kind of have to respect, because, I mean, every single race is G1, 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 and we both know that G1's top class in Europe are better than the American G1, so I guess you have to, I mean, unless you just know he's off form, but I mean, on paper, he looks like he can compete. I'm not picking him either, because I just don't know what the plan is, but that just sounds, what you just said just sounds like a plan to go 0 for 4 to me. I mean, I don't think he's going to win any of them doing all that traveling. I just don't think that's really a plan. It just seems like they want to see their colors on 4 different continents or something. Red Rifle is definitely improving. I mean, he's a lot better at the age of 5, which is nice to see. You know, the Giants Causeway breeding maybe kicking in a little bit, that Gulch breeding kicking in. I ended up picking just, I mean, taking a flyer. I didn't go with Messi just because I think he's going up in class. And yeah, it's kind of the upset that I'm not picking the big German, but I mean, I think he'll get the distance, and he's ran some okay races over there. But I just think, I don't know, can he really beat all these proven Grade 1 horses? So I'm not going with Messi because of that. I mean, he's usable. I just went with Gardini. I like the fact that he's ran in some Grade 1s and Grade 2s. We've seen in the past couple of years more and more of these France-based horses are coming over and running okay. And even though this guy isn't a German bred, he ran in Germany. So I'm, in a roundabout way, I'm still going with the big German, just a different route.
Yeah, and we mentioned this a little bit on our Arlington Million preview, that when you get a horse here who has ran in Germany and is an Entire, he's not gelded. So when he's coming here now and getting first Lasix, that's a big deal, because it means that, you know, he had German form. Should he run really well, you presume he could have possibly stood in Germany after his career's over. But with getting Lasix, he would never be an approved stallion there. So the fact that he then is getting Lasix makes you think that he definitely was a bleeder. You wouldn't give it to a horse like that unless they were bleeding. He is owned by Australian connections, so perhaps, you know, he's going to maybe run a race here and then maybe go down to Australia later in the year. You know, I don't know totally what's the plan with him. I haven't heard, but the connections would make you think that maybe run here and then, you know, I don't know, maybe a Melbourne Cup, something of that nature, Caulfield Cup.
He does get blinkers on, and he drops 12 pounds from that last race.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to go off, you know, even longer odds on a horse like Fixador and Messi and Twilight Eclipse. Like, I think he could be 15, 16 to 1, and I guess I'd rather have him. You know, Twilight Eclipse is definitely live. You know, I do want to, even though I was impressed with Red Rifle and I thought he definitely was the best horse in that last race, for some reason, the whole race that last time, I just thought War Dancer was ridden very passively. Like, they just waited and they waited and they waited and they waited.
He wanted to go.
And he wanted to go. So I think that horse, if he's ridden a little more aggressively, will probably run better, and people will wonder why. And I just thought they waited and waited too long the last time. And then when it finally came time to kick it in, Red Rifle just out-sprinted him. But maybe this time, now that he's 15 to 1, they won't be so confident.
Maybe, but I wonder what, I don't know what you can do with a horse like War Dancer. Just in this year alone, he's lost to Twilight Eclipse and he's lost to Red Rifle. Could you really pick a horse here to win who has fairly recently been defeated by two rivals in this race? I don't think I could.
Yeah. Although then you go back to this race last year, and he was fourth at 8-1 to Main Sequence and Twilight Eclipse. So I mean, his form is there. Like he could run anywhere from first to seventh, but maybe that last race. I mean, like I don't think he's really going to win, but it wouldn't
No.
surprise me to run second or third at a nice price. And I just think that last race he was ridden very passive.
No, I completely agree with you on the ride. But I don't know. For me, he's never been one I've latched on to, and I don't know if it's because of Bill Mott or whatnot, but he just kind of seems one that people have, I think, have made him out to be better than what he really is.
Yeah, he does seem to take a lot of money, except I think this is the first time in his career he won't. Like
Yeah.
with Messi in there, with Motion, and then you throw in Flintshire. I think this is the first time that he won't get that kind of that soft money, and so that's what I'm saying. Like he might actually be worth throwing in a few bets just because now he's going to be longer odds. But then again, I think, well, can he really win? And so yeah. But I just think that maybe he doesn't pay off tomorrow or Saturday, but I think he's got a race in him at longer odds if he gets a more aggressive ride in a small field. Somewhere there's a race with his name on it, and I think it's going to be when people least expect it.
Yeah. No, that certainly could be the case.
The Travers Stakes, time to paint the canoe, and we kind of speculated. It looked all along to me, anyways, that they were going to go Travers. They just didn't want to say it before the Haskell, just because.
Well, there must be a bonus, right? I mean, because they're getting bonuses.
Yeah. I mean, there's some money written into the sale of the horse that if he won the Travers, the owner gets more money, not just the bigger purse of the Travers. He literally gets $2, $3, $4 million extra because when he wrote the contract last January, he said, well, what if I win the Triple Crown? And what if I win the Travers? And he threw in some races. And so he's not only just running for the $1.6 million, and the Stallion Farm doesn't get that money. That literally goes straight to the owner. So it's interesting race. I do want to mention that the track, the entire meet, has favored outside closers.
Yes.
And something tells me they're going to juice up the track on Saturday.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if it was normal, I think Pharoah would struggle a little bit. I'm not saying he's not. I'm going to pick him, but I'm not expecting a Haskell-type performance. I think he's in for a dogfight. But if they just juice up the track, I don't think it'll matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty surprised if the track wasn't playing to American Pharoah's liking. I was just having a talk with a friend earlier today saying, like, can you imagine Breeders' Cup that Keeneland's going to be a runway ready for Pharoah? I, I don't see him losing here. It's kind of annoying because these are the spots where, it's kind of like every year in the Belmont where we're like, okay, a horse won the first two, now we can bet the house against him. But this just doesn't, in any sort of fashion, look the type of race where Pharoah is going to be beat pace-wise. The problem is, and I think that, really his biggest competitor would be Texas Red, which I think everyone has sort of contended to this point. The problem is that Texas Red last time out really, it's weird to say because people know his running style, but he greatly benefited from those slow fractions. When they went that slow out front, he was able to sit close, which he can never normally do. And he was able to be in a striking position, which is not typical for him. Usually, when a race is run at a very steady tempo, then he's out the back. So now we get to this race where on paper you don't see a lot of pace, but Pharoah's never going to go slow. That's not him. He goes out there and he runs at a very steady tempo. When you look at the fractions of the races he's won, particularly those where he's been on the front end, they're very consistent. And that is the sort of race shape that is a killer for Texas Red. Texas Red, when he's not going to sit there right up close on somebody's back like he did with Japan, he needs the race to really slow down at the end so that his closing kick is effective. I don't see it happening. I think, again, and I've tried to make this point so many times, there are no words for how dominant a horse can be when they have the running style Pharaoh does. When you have that high cruising speed and you can carry it over a distance of ground, there are very, very, very few running styles that can compete with that. I still think if a horse is going to beat Pharaoh, it's going to be a horse who can go forward and can sit right off of his back. But we haven't seen anybody who's good enough with that style. And so I don't see it here. Frosted is not going to overturn the form. He's not. You know, most of these horses he's faced, they aren't going to overturn that form with him suddenly unless he seriously regressed. Upstart, I don't think is going to run. So it really just comes down to Texas Red, and I don't see him being anywhere within contact of Pharaoh early. He'll be coming late. I just don't think that he's that good that he's going to just be able to overwhelm Pharaoh late. I don't see it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, it sounds like Upstart is going to scratch and point for the Philadelphia Derby, which makes sense.
It'll do much more sense.
You know, I do want to point out that, you know, that last race, Pharaoh ran really well.
Yes.
And he clearly was the best horse. But you got to remember the track that day, like the fact that Upstart and Competitive Edge were in that race made him look that good. Like he was a fast horse who was sucked into a fast pace, so he actually was able to flash his talent. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Now, if Upstart doesn't run, he's running with a bunch of dogs. The 6 furlongs will be 114. Maybe he falls asleep. Like, he probably won't look that good. I mean, and again, he'll run slow and everybody will bitch about it, but like that is the way it works. Like if you run 113 for 6, you're going to get a slow speed figure.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I anticipate us seeing this race and we'll hear the same thing again. We'll see Pharaoh out front by himself. I don't see anyone here fast enough to go with him. And then the race will finish, he'll win, Texas Red will be closing, and we'll hear the same thing where it's blah-de-blah-de-blah. If Texas Red only had a lot of pace here, maybe he would have beat Pharaoh. When really, even though Pharaoh won't get the figure he got in Haskell, he may never get that again. That was a totally different, like, the class of that race combined with the speed of that race is going to give it a rating that you aren't normally going to see. But I don't think American Pharoah ever really runs slow, if you get me. He'll just throw down, you know, 23 and change, 23 and change, 23 and change, all the way around the track. How do you beat that?
In this case,
he doesn't slow down, so how do you beat that?
Yeah, I don't know. I do. Now, we've got a dilemma on our hands. We really have a Twitter dilemma on our hands.
Uh-oh.
Because every time Keen Ice runs, his fans say that it was closing late. And now you got all of Texas Reds fans who think he's going to be closing late. What is going to happen here? We can't, this is not good for you. Keen Ice fans won't have an excuse, and neither will Texas Red fans have an excuse if this happens here.
Okay, Keen Ice has a much better closing kick than Texas Red. He'll also be 5 lengths behind Texas Red. So, I don't get it. The amount of hype Keen Ice got after the Haskell, like, it made you sit there like, can people read fractions? Because they went so fast. The only horse who got the perfect setup in that race was Keen Ice. He ran good. He is what he is. The problem with Keen Ice is that most races, he doesn't really have a chance because he needs everything to go his way pace-wise, and he's not going to get that here.
Well, assuming Upstart scratches, I think Keen Ice is actually better than Texas Red. I don't know if that means anything, but I think Texas Red's going to get a lot of money here.
I think Keen Ice is more proven than Texas Red, that's for sure.
Well, I think he can get 10 furlongs.
Yes.
I'm not so sure Texas Red's just a closer. That doesn't mean he can get 10 furlongs.
Yes, which people seem to get mistaken. When we said how Texas Red lost to Speedster, and everybody wanted to make all of these excuses that, well, it was off the layoff and this and off that and off whatever, instead of giving Speedster the credit that I think he really was due in that race, that's exactly the case I made to everybody. How do you know this isn't, like, the best race to date that Texas Red has ever ran, still, was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. and that was over a mile and 16. So how all of a sudden he is, this 10 furlong monster. It's hilarious to me that people spent months questioning whether or not Honor Code wanted 10 furlongs, but for Texas Red, it's a given, right?
Well, and that's where like the fandom does come in. So to me, I end up boiling it down as I think they're, again, I made money in the Belmont just because I did a straight exacta over Frosted, and I'm coming right back with those two. I'm coming straight exacta, American Pharoah over Frosted and Keen Ice. I think with Frosted it pays $8, $9. I think with Keen Ice it pays 15 or 16, and I'll take that. I mean, if I can beat Texas Red for second, I'll take a $12 average exacta, and I can play both combinations, and that's the way I plan on playing it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way you have to play it. Like for me, when I look at this sequence of 4 races we just did, I liked Private Zone and Pharaoh. Clearly, I can't really play that sequence. That's not going to work. You need too much to happen in the other races. So, for me, when I look at this race, I definitely can see where you're going with Pharaoh over Keen Ice. I would be intrigued by that. I'd be intrigued by Pharaoh over Taylor Verb even. I know he upgraded over the sloppy surface, but I think now again back to 10 furlongs is what he wants. I would completely toss that West Virginia Derby. That race was a mess for everybody. Everybody in that race was a mess. So I could see using him underneath American Pharoah. Those would probably be the two that I would be looking at to use under him. I think that's the way you play this sort of a race, is take Pharoah, toss Texas Red, throw a couple bombs underneath, and, you see what happens.
Yeah, I think, I do think Pharoah is going to be a little vulnerable, like I say. He's not going to get those fast fractions to make him look good. So he's going to be stuck doing the 24, 48, 112, 3. Also, I mean, he is shipping twice within a month. And bottom line is everybody can complain all they want, but Barron last year lost for that one reason.
Yes.
And it, the fact that Barron's done nothing this year has nothing to do with last year's form, and people just can't separate that fact.
No, and the thing was, too, with Byron is that when Byron won the Haskell, that was the race nobody was on him. And then when he came to this race, this was the race that he was the sure thing. Everybody knew Byron was going to win, and then what happened? He finished last.
Yeah, and then they hated him the rest of the year, and that's all. That's all these odds are decided.
Bad vibes on him before this race last year.
So I think that's how these races are decided, and that's how they're bet a lot of times. And Texas Red is being bet because for some reason nobody that had him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile wanted to bet him in the Derby, but he wasn't in the Derby. So this is their way of betting him, even though he's had 2 preps and they really weren't that great, either one of them.
And he's never gone this far.
There's nothing in this pedigree that's changed. He's not really bred for 10 furlongs. I mean, he's just not. So
no, we say this time and time again earlier in the year when we get to some of the major Kentucky Derby preps, and you'll start to get heavy favorites coming into races, and they'll get really bet when they're facing a circumstance they've never faced before. And to me, that's almost always a bad bet, to take a horse at potentially an underlay price, doing something they've never done. I mean, I get that just because you haven't tried to do it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but if you haven't done it before, I want a little bit bigger price than maybe what some others do. He's the one who I think is the play against in here, that's for sure. I'm with you on using Pharoah, keying him on top of a couple price, and then like I said, Keen Ice, Taylor Verb would interest me in that sort of a position. It's an interesting race. Like I said, I think Pharoah is like you, he's a little bit vulnerable, but this field is not good. This is it's a very starkly different field from what we got in here last year, class-wise, I would say, which is why I think Pharoah is a little bit more of a sure thing than Byron was.
Well, last year you had 3 legitimate contenders. This year, I mean, last year all the good horses were in this race. This year it's the same thing, but the problem is that all of the good horses have already lost. I mean, last year Barron hadn't faced Wicked Strong and those other horses. This year, every one of these horses, except for Texas Red, has faced Pharoah, and they've all lost multiple times. Like, there is no way you can go to the window and say, I'm going to bet Fermento this day. I mean, you can, and that doesn't mean he can't win. I'm just saying you know, Fermento might win, but it has nothing to do with looking at the form and saying this is why he won. I mean, it is what it is. Same thing with Travers. Like, as well as he ran in the Preakness, if you want to think that he ran well that day, like he still wasn't close to catching Pharoah.
Yeah, no, he's not going to win. You can't use him on top.
You know, so, you know, same thing with, you know, Upstart. I thought Upstart ran pretty good in the Haskell, but the point is he still lost by 6 or 8 lengths. I mean, it, like, you know, and Key Nice closed, but that's just because Pharoah was jogging at the end. So that close really doesn't mean anything. No. But I guess if you just want to go by that, I guess I'd rather play Key Nice.
I think it wasn't. To me, it's not so much the closing towards Pharoah as it is he passed everybody else.
Yeah, past everybody else who set the 109 fraction. So yeah. I do think it's an interesting race because I think Pharoah's a little vulnerable. Like I think shipping across the country twice is not that easy of a thing, and there's a reason why trainers will not do it. And that 4 immediately puts him a little bit of a regression. I think if the track was playing normal, like if I could guarantee that you had the track surface that's been playing the last 2-3 Saturdays, I would be tempted to put a few horses in there. But I think we'll know Friday afternoon and Saturday where the track's at, and I think that'll determine if they've, you know, got it set up for him. But, you know, Pharoah is better than these horses. I just do think it's a tough, it doesn't matter if it's Pharoah or anybody. I just think winning the Haskell and the Travers is a tough combo. I mean, it just is.
What do we make of, you know, obviously we've established we both like Pharoah to win. What do we make of the horse like Smart Transition underneath, who comes in here off of winning the Curlin? Now, it wasn't the most talent-wise, it wasn't the best edition of the Curlin we've ever seen, but won the race well. Step Up and Trip, I would think, pedigree-wise, looks like it suits. He has some experience here at Saratoga. He's thrown down 2 straight bullets. Do you look at him as a horse who could maybe hit the board?
Oh, yeah. I think he's just as, you know, I think he's better than a horse like Travers and even some of those other horses. In fact, I think he could be near the pace if Upstart scratches. Not to say that that's going to help him, but I kind of expect him to be sitting 2nd or 3rd early and probably will run pretty well.
Okay. I drafted him on my fantasy team. So
yeah, I mean, I think you got to, I mean, my whole strategy will be to toss Texas Red second.
Yes.
And if there's a way to make a few dollars in the exacta, or maybe hitting a try cold, or, you know, playing a couple combinations second and only a couple third, that's what I'm going to try to do. Mm-hmm. You know, and then play the other races, pick 3s and doubles, and just kind of ignore, you know, I don't really think, you know, unless I throw out Flintshire, and I'm not as bearish on Flintshire as you are, but I can see the case made. But again, you know, if no matter whoever you like in the Sword Dancer, if that double's paying $6 or $7, that's better than a 220 win ticket. So I mean, whoever you like, just play it straight. I mean,
a lot of people are looking at Frosted now, coming from the Jim Dandy to this race. They're saying, okay, from the 1 1/8, we're stepping up to a 1 1/4 now. He's more effective at this distance. Is it crazy? This is how I think. Is it crazy to think that for him, a 1 1/4 is really short of his best? That he ran his best race in the Belmont on a 1.5 miles, and that he isn't effective at this distance?
I just think he's a class horse. So when I handicap, the reason why I have to use him is just because, I mean, after all of that, those string of races, since they fixed him, and since they fixed him, he hasn't run a bad race. So to try to say that he's, I mean, I just don't know how you can not include him 2nd and 3rd in wagers unless you just think he's hurt, because he's ran 5 good races in a row. I mean, yeah. And the one race, everybody knows or thinks now that he swallowed his tongue and
no, he did. Yeah, he did.
Bled and all that stuff. So I mean, I just don't know how you can not include Frosted. I just think he's a 10 furlong horse now. And so, like I say, but I think that exacta will pay more than you're thinking. It paid $11 on Belmont Day, and I wouldn't be surprised if people are going to be betting Key Nice and Texas Red and these other horses. I wouldn't be surprised if that Frosted exacta is not $12 again. Now, I think it'll be more with Key Nice, but I think Texas Red will be the $5 exacta, and that's the one I'm not going to play.
Yeah. Frosted, to me, is he's a strange one. He's kind of like the little bit classier version of Mr. Z, and not even that he always runs second. It seems like no matter what class level he runs at, he's there. He just doesn't win.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. Like I almost think he's one who, if you finish third here or something, people will say, "Well, drop him down to a G3 or something," and I just think he'll do the same thing. Like,
Yeah, because he doesn't have the raw speed. No, he's going to run. He's in the right spot because in the Philadelphia, what you're saying is scratch him and run him in the Philadelphia Derby. No, he'll lose that race.
yeah.
Divining Rod or somebody would beat him. I mean, that's exactly it. Frosted needs to run in a 10 furlong race with a full field to run second or third. It would be interesting to ever see him in a full field 10 furlong race without Pharoah. I mean, I actually would love this race if Pharoah wasn't in it. I think
it
this
would be a fantastic betting race.
it would be a great betting race, and that's what I was hoping for all summer long, is that we'd finally really weed out Texas Red and Frosted and Keen Ice, and we get 4-1 on any of them, and then whichever one you like, you could pound. But Pharoah kind of ruins that. But it is, Pharoah's held his form for a long time, but I'm that shipping twice. I mean, even if this horse was based at New York, that would be a tough two, and shipping all the way back, shipping across, you've already heard they're bringing them out on Friday to get the crowd. I mean, I know people think that those are small little things, but all those small little things add up, so he's not going to run a 120 speed figure. And he's probably going to be all out to win. I mean, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
too interesting, with what's happened now since he's last ran with Beholder, and I mean, you kind of have to figure she's probably going to go Classic if she's healthy. I mean, she has had issues over her career. If she's healthy, I think Classic's the way she'll go, because there's very few situations where a horse genuinely has nothing to lose, and her going Classic would be one of them. But if he runs here and is all out here to win, very possible, do they even go to the Classic? Because, and I said it on Twitter, and a lot of people gave me, a hard time over it, but you and I know that if he won here and then ran the Classic and lost to Beholder, every history book would hold that against him forever.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I would say is if somehow Zayat loves money right now, and if there's something in that contract that says he gets another $10 million if he wins the Classic, trust me, he'll run in the Classic.
Can they give $5 million for Beholder not to run in the Classic?
And maybe hey, I believe in that type of stuff. I know some people think there's some conspiracy, but I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden
it's we're going to put her in the distaff.
We're going to put her in the distaff, and then guess who has a date with Pharoah for free? I mean, no, this stuff happens.
Yes. Absolutely.
And people just don't understand that. I mean,
it's a business. It's always a business first and foremost.
And especially the top end business.
Oh yeah.
And that would not surprise me at all. And 5 years from now, all of the rumors would come out. Oh, really? We just, that's exactly what would happen. So I firmly believe if Pharoah stays healthy, I would book all bets that Beholder will not run against Pharoah. They're setting. If Pharoah gets to that day, they want Pharoah to win. I mean,
we won't know anytime soon. You believe me, this will be milked till the week of the Classic, whether or not is he running, is he not running. We'll hear this all the way up to it.
So yeah, I mean, and that's fine, but I really believe that Beholder will not face him in the Classic for the reasons we just laid out. They'll find. I mean, Beholder's about Beholder too, and these two mega rich guys can get together and agree. I mean, what if all of a sudden Beholder, that guy has mares, and then he breeds him to Pioneer of the Nile, and there'll be so much horse flesh being traded that there's a lot of behind the scenes deals going on. So, but on the other hand, Beholder won't have to do that. If Pharoah goes out of training, then Beholder can do whatever she wants to do. But there'll be a lot of behind-the-scenes thing. But, what we've proven in the last 2 weeks, there's only 2 horses that can knock Pharoah off. And they're both horses just like you said. I mean, the problem is you say, well, Pharaoh's got speed and he can finish. Well, yeah, there's 3 horses in America that have that combination. Liam's Map, Pharoah, and Beholder. I mean, that's it.
Yes. I think you can say Honor Code could beat him, but again, you would need maybe Liam's Map and Beholder to run
Yeah,
to
you
get
would need
that
those two
pace
to run. You can't
going.
count on that. I mean,
Um,
so I
but
mean, yeah. If you get all three of them in there, yeah, then I love Honor
and
Code.
even
But
Liam's Map, see, and then this rate, the classic, if it happens, it gets really weird too, weights wise. Beholder's mare, she would carry a pound more than American Pharoah because he's 3 years old and it's weight for age. Liam's Map would pack 9 pounds on off of that Whitney, because that, of course, was a handicap. So it all gets crazy from that perspective, too, as we go forward.
so yeah, I mean, Pharaoh. I do think people are. I mean, I do think some of the older crowd is underestimating Pharaoh. I think he's legitimately good. He's the best horse. I mean, earlier this year, the best. I mean, the best horses, two best horses I've ever seen. I've been following it since '87. Is Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. They were the same crowd. I can firmly say, and I don't have to. I mean, I think Pharaoh's better than those two now. And for ever since 1989, I've been saying the best horse I ever saw was Sunday Silence and Easy Goer, and now it's Pharaoh. And that still the same thing if he loses this Saturday. Like that doesn't matter to me. Like I don't care if he loses. Like
No.
I mean,
To people like us, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people out there it does, and I think there's a lot of people who are from the older generation who are sitting there waiting for him to lose. It's the interesting dichotomy of the sport because the demographic of it is mostly older people, and when you get old, you tend to look back and be like, those were the good old days. And then the young people say these are all the best horses. So you always have two extremes kind of battling with each other, that the young people have a recency bias, the older people have a super old school bias, and so we obviously typically see kind of contrasting opinions on horses like this, who people my age will say is great, and then people who are triple my age will say, well, you never saw a great horse, so how do you know what great is?
yeah. Well, and the other thing is the dichotomy is the betting.
Yes.
See, the handicapper in me wants him to lose.
Oh, absolutely.
But that doesn't mean anything. I want lots of horses to lose, and they don't lose. So that doesn't, that. So
I think these
but
are
there's
the races where you have to keep your head about yourself, and you have to honestly look at the form and say, can he lose? What would it take for him to reverse form with some of these horses to lose? To sit here and, just bet him to lose because you want him to lose, now you're stretching. And, we talked about this earlier in the year with Twilight Eclipse and Main Sequence. That people were betting Twilight Eclipse, who had lost to Main Sequence 4 times, because they said, well, if Main Sequence regresses and then Twilight Eclipse, runs his best race, he can win. And it's like, that's really stretching, though, isn't it? So you got to keep your head about yourself, your emotions out of it, and honestly look at the form and see, do you see something that indicates to you that American Pharoah, can lose? Should everybody run their race? I don't see it, but maybe others do.
yeah, and I go back to the year the New England Patriots were 16-0, and they lost that Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why everybody likes that now is because they lost it. If the New England Patriots would have won that Super Bowl, nobody would have cared. Like that's where I'm going with Pharoah. Like it's almost better if something does happen and he does lose, because then they'll appreciate the wins. Right now,
if he lost this and went to the Classic and won, what kind of a story would that be?
Like that would be so much more fun.
He had hardship and then he came back and won.
Yeah, people love the comebacks. I mean, and they do. That's why Rocky sold. I mean, that they love comebacks. So that's what I'm saying. Like, part of sports is that you don't know who's going to win. If Pharoah just keeps on winning and he never loses, then it's not sports, because it's just preordained every time he runs he's going to win.
Yeah. People, at some point, people get bored with domination.
And so it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to see how it plays out. But I think, like you say, on paper, like when I say, well, I think, Holy Boss might lose, or, oh, I think Flintshire might lose. Well, like, that's because on paper I can make rationales for other horses. When I say American Pharoah might lose, it's just, he might lose, but I mean, on paper he can't lose. So there is a big difference.
Looking at it, asking too much. It's like, well, maybe if he breaks a step slow, and then this horse goes to the lead, and then this happens, and this happens, it's just like the probability of that happening is probably pretty in line with this price.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple. There's only one or two legitimate reasons why he would lose. One, he's just a little tired. He just literally is tired. He just
Yes.
the second trip wipes him out, or he bleeds. Well, I
Yes.
mean, that's any horse can lose because they bleed, so it doesn't really mean anything.
And he is not something I don't think he has a history of, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. But I'm just saying, like all of a sudden, I mean, every once in a while, a horse will just bleed for no reason or out of the blue, and
It is remarkable, though, for him, with how many questions were surrounding him to start. I think people have completely forgotten that he missed the Breeders' Cup Juvenile with what sounded a decently serious injury, and how late of a start he got to the year, and how it didn't matter. And nobody's talking about that now, but it just makes this whole streak even more impressive to me. There are very few horses that could do that.
yeah, and then even that loss. I mean, people don't understand. Just freaked that day.
And that track was so weird that at that
Yeah.
time you couldn't predict one way or another how that Del Mar synthetic was playing that day.
So, I mean, I think people like, well, isn't any good anymore. It doesn't matter. That I said at the time.
That race might be why he's not good anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like isn't good anymore, but that's not the point. That day there wasn't a 2-year-old in America that would have beat him. Period. I mean,
no.
In probably the last 2 or 3 years, like it was that good of a race, but it was like you say, it was on a funky surface, so you don't really know anyways. But you know, every once in a while, there's just a day that a horse can't lose, and that was one of those days where was not going to lose,
Yeah.
and Pharoah, you know, I think long term it ended up being an advantage for Pharoah because he was undefeated. The silliness would just be mad. I couldn't even open up the racing form if he was undefeated because it would just be stupid people saying stupid things. Like the fact that he got that loss is good because now we don't have to hear about this undefeated stuff.
I do think it is remarkable, though, that in essence he's getting better. I mean, I don't know how other people rate it, but to me, his Haskell was clearly the best race he's ever ran in.
Well, it should be. I mean, that's when Sunday Silence and Easy Go. I mean, they peaked in the Breeders' Cup class. I mean, a developing 3-year-old, his races should be better.
Yeah, but he just doesn't seem to get tired. Nothing seems to wear on him. The Haskell, to me, for him, it was a phenomenal race because aside from Keen Ice, every other horse in there, to a degree, changed their running style to beat Pharoah, and they all lost. And there's something really crazy about that.
Yeah. No, Pharoah is, like I say, I think most people are underrating him. Like you say, some of the older people just because they're not going to ever give the younger horse the benefit of the doubt. And then you've got the speed figure people who I think are even worse because it just doesn't matter. You win races, you win races. And, you know, but then, you know, there's that group of people that just thinks, like, we should just allow Pharoah to win. Well, what's the point of running races if you're just going to let him win? Like there are that group of people that really wants him to just face 5 donkeys and then they can say, oh, wow, he won. Like, you know, they want it to be like the Washington Generals or something.
I think even transcending American racing, and I don't know how many people look at these things over here, but on the regular time farm in Europe, you know, their rankings, which take into account class and the speed of the races, his ranking is the highest in the world. And on the Longines, you know, top horses in the world, his peak performance is the highest in the world. They're both the Haskell. It is phenomenal to me that an American horse running in dirt races is getting that. He gets more respect overseas sometimes than I think he does here. And that's a phenomenal thing because, you know, a lot of times overseas handicappers don't really rate the quality of American races, particularly on dirt, to be as high. You know, obviously they have a little bit of a home crowd bias, and that's fair. So to see him ranked #1 horse in the world by all of these international organizations it's remarkable, and it's things that I hope when his career is over really get talked about because you just don't see that, especially in a year where you had a horse like Golden Horn in England who won, you know, was just trouncing older horses the way he has, won the Derby, and Pharoah easily is ranked ahead of him. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I think, I think they're not as speed-based rankings too, so that's why it's nice to have a little bit of a different perspective,
Yeah,
because
for
I think so many
performance.
of the American ratings start with speed figures, and I'm not a big fan. I mean, I think speed figures are a guide. I just don't think they should be the ultimate rating.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great card. The weather's supposed to be nice, the last I heard. So I think that shouldn't be a factor. I definitely think of the four races, I expect no more than two of the favorites to win. I don't think this is one of those chalk fests. I do think, the favorites are going to run well, and I do think the winners of some of these races, I think to win these races, you're going to have to run really well. So I think we're going to have four deserving winners and probably 6 or 7 horses that run really well, and it'll just be interesting to see who steps up on Saturday, because I do think, horses like Tamar Coos and even a couple of the other horses in the Forego, if all of a sudden they win, people will think totally different of them. And the Sword Dancer, I mean, maybe Flintshire just wins. I really don't know. Like I said, I'm picking Guardian, but what if Twilight Eclipse wins or anybody else? I mean, I think that means that horse stepped up a little bit. And I mean, I like the Sword Dancer field probably just as much as the Arlington Million field in terms of quality, so maybe even a little bit better. I don't know.
I think I like it a little better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the winner of the Sword Dancer goes ahead in my rankings of the Pizza Man. But now if they announce that the Breeders' Cup turf is going to be run at Arlington Park, well, then the Pizza Man will win.
Well, it's a little sad too, I think, though, that in its state of where Arlington is right now, that 2 years in a row now, I think the Sword Dancer's clearly been the better of the two races, and that's a shame, because Chicago racing it's necessary. It really has its place, and should rumors kind of be true about the state of the racing in that location, that's tough, and it's hard to see happening in front of our eyes.
No, yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, the Chicago history, because that's really where it should be, and it's kind of just been allowed to falter. So, should be a great day of racing. I'm looking forward to watching all four races. Betting-wise, who knows how much I'm going to dive in. But I will be playing straight exactas, Pharoah over Keen Ice and Frosted, and if I can double my money, that'll be fine with me.
Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye. And the ones I'm considering is Pharoah over Tail of Verve, Keen Ice, and Smart Transition. But this is also a race that you keep an eye on how those exactors are paying leading up to post time, because in races like this where a lot of people are going to be keying Pharoah on top, you might get weird exactas that get hammered, especially maybe with a horse like Keen Ice, who I think is a syndicate horse. So just watch out for some of those and make sure you're getting the appropriate payoffs. Don't just jump in blind.
Yeah, no, they'll change a little bit, and the thing of it is now from a wagering standpoint, it could be these races could go a lot of different ways. So we'll have to see how it plays out, and I'm hoping we get 8 or 9 good performances, and coming out of here, there's just as much chatter as going in, because I really think even the other 2 stakes races have some nice fields, and so it's going to be a good card, and see how it plays out. And I think we'll definitely have some top contenders we'll see on Halloween night and Halloween Eve.
Absolutely. And this is kind of we have this, and then we have kind of the Pennsylvania Derby Day, and then the Awesome again at Santa Anita. And, that's kind of it for our I guess the big day at Woodbine. So, but we're running low now on our kind of big Breeders' Cup prep days, and this is maybe the biggest one we have for a while.
All right, that's going to do it for this pick 4 look and paint the canoe and all that action. And the next week we've got the Woodward. We'll find a couple of other races, and that's going to do it for another edition of Down to the